Hello, welcome to Liberty Nation's LNTV. I'm Mark Angelides. Today, we're joined by Legal Affairs Editor, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, who also happens to be an emoluments expert. Now, this is certainly the buzzword for the week, Scott, what with President Trump fighting in multiple courts. Can you give us a quick summary on this?
Yes, I don't know that I can say that I'm an emoluments expert. I've done my best to understand these issues, Mark. There are three cases pending right now on the emoluments issue, two which will be heard in courts this week, one before the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals and one before the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. There's a third case that's still waiting for a decision on whether it will be heard by the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. So let's put that last one aside and focus on the two that will be heard this week. The first one, heard Monday, will be at the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. And in that case, they will hear whether or not Congress has the right to sue Donald Trump to prevent him from benefiting under the no emoluments prohibition of the Constitution for his hotel activities. The case on Thursday is similar, except that the parties are different. In that case, it's the district attorneys of Maryland and the District of Columbia, respectively, who have sued Trump on saying that that the Trump hotel activities within the District of Columbia have diminished the earnings of other private corporations that they represent as constituents in violation, Mark, yes, of the emoluments clause. And the court in that case will also rule whether or not that case can proceed. These two cases, Mark, are not about the merits of the case. They're just about whether or not the cases can even proceed through the courts.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the clause itself, Scott, and of course the current cases.
There are several emoluments prohibitions in the Constitution mentioned. The one that we're talking about, the word emoluments seems like it should be called payments or income or benefits. And it prohibits the president from gaining benefits from especially foreign entities. And so the idea behind the suits is that foreign governments and officials for foreign governments are booking hotels, conferences, you name it, at especially the Trump International Hotel property in Washington, D.C., and that Donald Trump is benefiting personally, financially from those benefits. And then that's where the violation comes from, according to the complaints.
Okay, so am I right in thinking this isn't about a specific instance then? It's about an ongoing, almost promotion of the Trump International, for example, by the virtue of President Trump being called Trump? Or is that just out there?
There is not one specific instance, but any specific instance of a foreign entity spending money at the Trump Hotel, I think beyond a de minimis amount, they would say, they being the various plaintiffs would say, is an emoluments violation based on their pleadings.
Okay, so this is it's difficult not to see this as let's just try and get Donald Trump through emoluments. But am I wrong in guessing that at some point this will end up in the Supreme Court?
Well, I think that to your first point, Mark, I think that Carl Racine and Brian Frosch, the activist district attorneys in D.C. and Maryland, respectively, are in fact using, this is an analysis, not a fact, but they seem, Mark, to be using the taxpayers' wallet in order to advance their political distaste and frustration with Donald Trump. The idea that this is money well spent or resources well spent for these district's attorneys, honestly, I find it to be laughable. It's a disgrace. What was the second question?
Is this going to end up being decided by the Supreme Court in the end?
It's hard to imagine how it wouldn't be, just because neither side would seem like they would take the appellate court's decision and rest on it. I will say this. The one way I would see it not reaching the Supreme Court is, I think that if the appellate courts rule in Donald Trump's favor, and I predict they will, because to call it some thin gruel, the basis for these suits, I find it to be especially thin. But if they rule for the Trump administration, and then the other parties appeal, I could see the Supreme Court just simply not granting those appeals. I think that's less likely because of the composition of the court. If Donald Trump were to lose, I think that would be less likely. So in any case, whether by picking the case and ruling on it or by not picking the case based on what's happened in the appellate courts, yeah, the Supreme Court's going to be the last word on this one.
Well, Scott, thank you for enlightening us on this. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Mark. I hope it wasn't too confusing.
It was just perfect. Thank you.
Hi, folks. Lisa K. Donner here, editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com. We hope you enjoyed watching this video, maybe even learned a thing or two. If so, please take a moment and subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there in the corner. Thanks so much.